that the play is based upon came into existence about 25 years ago. I was a pretty skeptical young man when I came to this country in '87, 3 years after the fact. And I am answering your question. I have to give you a little bit of context. So even when I was in India, I would hear some of my Sikh relatives in Delhi say, what had happened in Delhi was no riot. It was organized. It was organized by the ruling party. And I would dismiss what they told me. Why? Because I read the newspapers. The newspapers said the Sikhs brought this upon themselves because Sikhs killed Indira Gandhi. And people were so upset. And Sikhs were caught distributing sweets. Did you hear those lines in the play? That rumors were spread that Sikhs were distributing sweets. Rumors were spread that bodies filled with corpses were coming into Delhi from the Punjab. Rumors were spread that the Sikhs had poisoned the water supply of Delhi. I heard all of these things. I didn't believe them. I was skeptical. 3 years later, I came to this country, and somewhat serendipitously, I stumbled upon some writings which definitely had a huge impact on me and changed my perspective very significantly. And I started by saying that I was very skeptical. Now, it's important for me to share these writings with you. And one of the most important reasons is that these are available now. These are freely available, and you can all go home, download them on the internet, and read them yourselves. The first thing that I read was a slim report, colloquially known as the Black Book. And by the way, I have to mention that the Black Book is evoked early in the play when the group of Jewish artists start by wanting to honor the victims of the Kishinev pogrom of 1903, and they stumble upon the Black Book, which brings them to the story of a lesser-known massacre. And in a powerful moment of recognizing that embracing the pain of the other is a great way of honoring your own victims, they shift focus to Delhi. Well, this was the little Black Book. The real title of the Black Book is Who Are the Guilty? And it was produced by two Delhi-based civil rights groups, the PUCL and the PUDR, under the aegis of Justice Tarkunde, who was a retired judge of the Bombay High Court. Unimpeachable sources. These were not Sikhs saying that what had happened in Delhi was an organized massacre. These were highly respected jurists and civil rights activists. By the way, some of them, including Rajni Kothari, who published this, were arrested. Cases of sedition were filed against them. Cases of waging war against the state were filed against them, which were, of course, very wisely dropped soon after. But these were unimpeachable sources that unequivocally said and documented that this was an organized massacre organized by the sitting ruling party, the Congress. 3 ministers whose likenesses appear on one of the paintings and who appeared in the play as the plotters, the so-called Notorious Three, were explicitly named by the survivors. Jagdish Teichler, H.K.L. Bhagat, Lalit Makin. They were all seen in the neighborhoods, encouraging the killers, paying them their fee, which was, you may have heard in the play as well, a bottle of liquor and 100 rupees. They were personally seen distributing this largesse to the murderers as the murder and the mayhem continued while the police looked away. These were the things that changed my perspective. The second thing that I have to mention that's important is an article by the veteran journalist Madhu Kishwar, who publishes a so-called women's magazine in India called Manushi. It's really a progressive magazine. Madhu Kishwar, in sharp contrast to mainstream media, provided a narrative in an article called Gangster Rule, which you can also find on the internet, that absolutely corroborates everything those human rights reports say. And the third thing that I read was an academic paper by anthropologist Veena Das, who is now at Johns Hopkins. Unfortunately, she isn't in town and she couldn't come to our play yesterday. But Dr. Das followed the stories of some of the children who survived. And I'm almost sorry to share with you that some of the stories that you saw enacted on stage today are true stories. There was a little boy called Kultar, who was deaf and mute, who saw his father lynched before his very eyes, and who could only articulate his trauma by acting it out with his body. There was a little girl called Balu, whose father was doused with kerosene and burned alive in front of her eyes, as this child held on to her father's hand until his last breath left his body. So unfortunately, these are true stories, and these were documented in Dr. Das's academic paper called Voices of Children. So these were the influences that helped me understand that what had happened in Delhi was no act of spontaneous retribution or a reaction. It was a carefully planned massacre. Just a couple of tiny details. You know how hard it is to organize anything in India, and was 30 years ago. Think about this. Crowds of men pouring out of trucks, armed with iron rods that were exactly the same length. In those days, electoral lists were prized material. You didn't have them published on the internet. Only the government had electoral lists that identified who lived where. In the play, there was a line that says, "A man with a list in no obvious haste points out homes to be laid to waste." This was documented in these reports, that these mobs were armed with electoral lists. They had check marks saying, these are the houses where Sikhs live. So learning about these things, and by the way, every piece of factual information that's shared in the poem and the play comes from these three sources, which to me are unimpeachable and are available for everyone to read. This is what helped me understand that what had happened was not a spontaneous angry reaction, but it was something that was meticulously planned. One final thing. There was a powerful moment in the play, which is one of my personal favorites, when the three conspirators are sitting, and there's a line that says, "From up above the orders have come to teach a lesson to the arrogant scum." This was a common theme in the PUCL report. When people were asked by the human rights activists, "Why did you do this?" Their response was, "Hukum upar se aaya hai." To a man in neighborhood after neighborhood, they all said, "The orders have come from up above."